Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Enye podcast. My name is Megan, and I'm going to be your Escucha podcast host for the semester. And I'd like to introduce a new addition to our team.
Hi, my name is Abby Herrera, and I'm your new co-host for Escucha this semester.
We also have two guests here with us today, two CSULB students, Carlo
Hey,
and
what's up?
Alexa.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about if speaking Spanish defines your Latinidad. My first question for both of you, you guys can pick who wants to answer first, but did you guys grow up speaking Spanish?
I did grow up speaking Spanish. It was definitely something that was spoken a lot in my household. Yeah, I definitely grew up speaking Spanish. I don't know about you. What about you?
Yeah, I grew up speaking Spanish. It was my second language that I learned hand in hand, like with English growing up. I kind of lost it growing up, but in school I didn't really learn it like too much.
Did you guys learn to read and write in Spanish too? Or was it just speaking primarily?
Growing up, I definitely did not learn how to read and write Spanish. It was more of something that you just picked up and that's what it was spoken.
Yeah.
It wasn't until around middle school, where in school they would teach us Spanish, and that's where I felt like I learned to read and write Spanish for sure.
That's interesting for me. I got Spanish classes introduced in high school, but I didn't read or write Spanish at all growing up, and I wasn't introduced books in Spanish up until high school as well, which is surprising too.
Yeah, it's just something that's like picked up, I feel like, especially when, I don't know, I feel like my case was definitely a little bit weird because both languages spoke in my house. Like my parents speak very good English. My mom is a first generation born here in the United States. And my dad is from Mexico City, but he moved here when he was around 15, and he already spoke pretty decent English. So I think I spoke more Spanish when my grandma moved in with us in our house, and she would only speak Spanish. It was definitely weird, I feel like.
No, like I feel that because like growing up, like I don't speak Spanish fluently, but like with like Chinese and Mandarin and stuff, like I only spoke it really with my grandma, and it wasn't until I started seeing her very frequently, like every weekend or like multiple times a week, that I think that my Mandarin started getting better because there was no one else to really talk with to better it. Because like no one, I don't know, it's like not something that you really like go to school and like speak, because everyone speaks English at schools.
Yeah, it's not like practice in your daily life unless you're like communicating with someone that only speaks that language.
Yeah.
In my household, when I grew up, my parents spoke English because my dad was born here, but my mom immigrated here when she was 12 and then learned English through school and whatnot, and she was pretty proficient in it. Her parents on her side, they didn't speak English very well, so growing up, I was kind of forced to speak Spanish with them. And my dad's parents, because they were established here in the States, they knew English pretty well, and so they were kind of like my scapegoat in speaking English instead of Spanish. And often growing up, I was practicing only in one side of like my family.
Yeah.
When my grandparents on that side had passed away when I was a little younger, like around 9 years old, I sort of stopped speaking Spanish, going to my other side of my grandparents, like that side of the family, being able to speak English and then only speaking it in school. Middle school, I didn't get Spanish either, so in high school, I was reintroduced to Spanish with classes, and it was like, oh, okay, fill out this worksheet. I can do that. But conversationally, I couldn't get it out of me. Like, I can understand everything that people speak around me.
Yeah.
And, like, even if people speak bad about me, like, the other day, this guy at Costco said something about me, and I was like, I understand you. And I summoned the Spanish out of me because I was like, I did not cut you in line. Like, you were trying to, I don't know. It was funny, and I digress.
That is so funny.
I digress, because I was like, I know what you said.
No, that happened to me at Red Shiny 9 once. Like, I got in line, and this guy behind me was, like, starting to, like, talk low-key and was saying, like, oh, she just, like, came up in here, and I just turned around and, like, in Mandarin, I was like, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And he just, like, looked away, like, got red in the face and looked away, and I was like...
Because they assume that you don't based off of what you look like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I know a little bit. Like,
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar with you is like I only spoke Spanish with like my grandparents over the summer, and then when I was like going into school and starting school, my mom was like, you're only going to speak Spanish at home because we don't want you to lose it. And then I went to school and I ended up like losing it a little bit, but then you get that practice. But then that same thing happens to me too, especially at work, where people just don't think I speak Spanish, and they'll just like look at me weird, and I'm like, hi, can I get your phone number? And they're like, And they start speaking in like broken English, and that's when I kind of get the social cue to be like, oh, ¿y su número de teléfono? And they're like, oh, okay. And like, it's kind of funny seeing how they react that way. Like, they get a little happy. But then in your guys' case, when you gotta catch them in the worst possible time.
It's been like 50-50 because like I would say like I know enough Spanish to get by. So like sometimes when people come into work, because I work at a restaurant, and they will start just like pointing to like the menu and stuff, and I like start talking to them, like I will start talking in Spanish, and they just get so happy. And I'm like, I'm glad that it is actually like useful and that like other people like appreciate it too.
Yeah. I mean, we do live in like
Southern California.
Yeah, where it's almost like a second language over here too.
Yeah. Did you guys feel yourselves like losing your Spanish like when you weren't speaking it as often?
Yeah, I feel like if I'm not practicing it, especially conversationally, like with me and my grandpa, we were like best friends. So I was at his house every single day. Me and my grandma, we would hang out too, but like it was me and him, like we were hanging out. So I was practicing my Spanish all the time. And I was told by my other grandparents who spoke English, well, that other side of my family, that they were kind of surprised that at my young age that I spoke Spanish so well, some of the vocab that I knew, because the only person that I was talking to was this elder, you know, my grandparent, my grandpa, that, you know, knew certain language that I was mimicking because he is who I was speaking with. And then as soon as that practice stopped, like with anything, you lose that, like, I don't know, if you stop working out, you kind of lose that like power that you have even to like lift things. So like for me, when I kind of stopped speaking Spanish, I kind of lost that within me, even though it's kind of in the back of my brain. It has to be summoned out, like I said.
Yeah,
I definitely felt like I lost it for sure. It wasn't until my grandma went back to Mexico when I was around 8 years old, and then I just stopped practicing it. My parents only spoke English in the household. They would speak Spanish between each other sometimes, but mostly English. And it wasn't again until middle school where it was like brought back. Yeah.
So do you guys ever feel yourselves like practicing it? Like just probably like at the store or even like listening to music or watching like anything in Spanish? Do you guys feel yourself practicing it? That's how I feel like I've gotten like a refresher, is just I listen to a lot of Spanish rock, and I'll just like find myself like singing, and I'm like, I did not know I knew the words in Spanish, but I do.
I work at a theme park. A lot of people just come up to me expecting me to speak Spanish, which, I have broken Spanish. Like, I do understand it fluently. I can speak it. I can get by. So I do practice it that way, where I do feel, too, sometimes where I'm like, damn, I should have kept it up, because then I can actually communicate with them and help them out.
I often don't practice it like in my own. Like sometimes I've downloaded like Duolingo or apps like that, and I don't stick to them. But in social settings, when people see me and they assume that I speak Spanish because I look Mexican, in linguistics there's a term that's like your rejection or your acceptance to communicating with somebody in the moment that you see that maybe they don't speak the same language as you. So you either slow down your speech, or you begin to speak with them in a way that they might be able to understand, or you reject them in that sense that you don't begin to speak with them. The other day I was at the Dollar Tree, and I was inside buying balloons for my mom for her birthday, and this older guy, he saw me and he asked me where those handheld fans were, but he asked me in Spanish. And not being able to communicate that, one, I'm not an employee, and two, maybe I don't know where those are, I just assumed to say that, you know, like in my broken Spanish, I said, I don't really know where those are, but they might be over here. And I literally walked him around the whole store, and he followed me, and we got to this section, and he was like, so where might they be? And I was like, maybe by the makeup. And he's continuing to ask me, but I didn't have the words to say, I'm not an employee, like I'm not sure, like I'm not the person to ask. And it was only until we finally walked around the entire store that I was like, it's my mom's birthday. I have these balloons for her. I'm carrying them around the whole time, walking around in Spanish, that it's her birthday and I'm not actually an employee. And he goes, oh, I thought you worked here. And I was like, no, but there's that willingness to like help or to have that communication that in those moments I'm practicing, even though I'm not intending to. And then I feel that, shoot, like I should have known how to communicate with this person by now. I would have been able to solve his problem in an instant, or, you know, like communicate that there's an employee over there and I'm not in a like green shirt for Dollar Tree.
It feels like my brain doesn't work fast enough sometimes, you know, like, again, like I can understand it fluently. Like it sounds like if someone speaks to me in Spanish, it sounds like English. Like I understand everything, but my brain doesn't work fast enough to translate the English into Spanish. And it takes time just to think about it. So it's a little bit difficult.
I agree, because like I'll talk to my grandparents, and I speak Spanish pretty decently. If I am thinking something in English and I have to be like, I have to say it in Spanish, I feel like my brain just stops working as soon as I have to say it. And like then everything's wrong grammatically.
Yeah.
And then I get made fun of.
You know, like when I was learning Mandarin, I started taking Spanish classes at the same time. And then like going to like my grandma's house, I would switch up the languages in my head. Like her and I would be in the middle of a conversation, then I would say something in Spanish and she'd be like, huh? And I'm like, I'm so sorry. I meant this. And then I would say it again in Mandarin and she was just like, what is going on with you? And I was like, I'm sorry. Like it's difficult. Like speaking English at home, and then I'm in high school taking Spanish as an elective, and then I'm taking extracurricular like AP Chinese to take this AP Chinese exam to get credit for college.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot. And she was like, she just looked at me and she was like, okay.
Yeah, I kind of relate to that because I'm half Mexican and half Salvadorian. So there's different dialects within countries. Like there are different words for different things, and I would switch them up depending on who I was talking to.
But there's also like words that are literally the same but mean different.
Yes.
Which is so confusing.
Exactly. Like in El Salvador, I think you say alberca for the pool, and then in Mexico you say piscina, or it's reversed, something like that. And so when I was with my Salvi family, I'll say the Mexican version. And then they're like, no, that's not the correct word. And I'm like, oh. And so they had to break it down. They're like, this is what you say with these grandparents, and this is what you say with your other grandparents.
That's like really confusing.
It was very, it still is confusing to this day.
Do you think the inability to speak Spanish fluently diminishes your Latinidad?
For me personally, it doesn't. Feel still very connected to my culture always. It's always in my household. I'm always practicing certain things that my culture does, I guess. So I don't think because I'm not great at Spanish makes me any less like Latino or Mexican, you know? Yeah.
I think sometimes by the look of yourself, you feel less Latina in a sense. And then you take away that language aspect and that community that you get when you're able to communicate. For example, my boyfriend's family, some of them speak English, some of them speak Spanish, the older aunts and uncles when we go to their house on Sundays. And there's that community that I am not able to interject myself with because I don't speak Spanish. I can sit at the table with them and I can look around and I look less Latina to them because I don't speak Spanish. There's maybe other people within the family who come as visitors and they speak Spanish, and there's a different acceptance. There's a different like sparkle to the eye of the aunts and uncles when they're able to communicate, and that makes sense because if I was able to communicate with them, I would have like that spark of joy too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so with me, I feel like in my household, we don't always practice a lot of different traditions. My mom will speak Spanish to and from, whatever. She speaks a lot of English, and so there's not like an emphasis on being Latina in my home. I feel like at school, I've had this increase in that like longing to be what it is that it means for it to be Latina. Without being able to speak Spanish, you feel like there's a loss in that, but I still speak Spanish. And I still have a little bit in me, and I still understand, and I can still help when I'm at the Dollar Tree. Or, like, you know, I used to work at the bowling alley, and, like, I used to memorize the script of what I needed to say. Like, I will be Latina, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Regardless of if I speak Spanish, speak 50%, 30% Spanish or whatever, there's just that, like, bloodline in you that, like, you have.
Yeah.
Have you guys been made to, like, feel bad about the fact that you don't speak Spanish fluently? Like, by friends, family, or, like, I don't know, strangers or anything like that?
Personally, like, no. Maybe I've had, like, a couple jokes with my cousins from Mexico when I go visit them. They're like, you speak English and you, like, can't fully speak it right. But I don't take it offensively, to be honest, because, yeah, it's true. I don't speak great Spanish, but to me, it doesn't really matter. I'm Mexican. Like, you can see me and I'm clearly Latino, you know? Like,
yeah.
So yeah, I don't know about how you feel about that.
No, I don't think I've ever felt that pressure of like feeling discriminated because I don't speak Spanish in that sense. It happens more in the opposite, that you don't speak English, that you're discriminated because of that.
Yeah.
Within the community, I feel like there's that disappointment that you don't speak Spanish within people that you should know. When it comes to like in public, people might not like offend me necessarily. They might be speaking around me because they think that I don't speak Spanish, but it doesn't necessarily offend me. They might know that I am Mexican, but they think that I'm just like the word that my professor has been using is pocha. You just don't speak Spanish well, or you don't
Yeah.
speak it well, and you just kind of look that way. And I've had less Spanish in that sense, but
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like definitely a term I've heard a lot too, though. Like
Yeah.
bochito or bocha. Like,
Yes.
I feel like it's something maybe closer to like the 90s, early 2000s when that word was broadly used, I feel like.
Yeah.
Also, you know those terms, but no sabo.
yeah.
Yeah, of course. But like, those are like older things I hear older people like call like Mexican American people, like, oh, you're
Yeah.
bochito. You know, like I don't know the no sabo.
I think the term that I've been told for me, or that I've told myself, is I'm whitewashed. Like, I'm not like a no sabo, or I'm not like a pocha. I'm whitewashed. Like, I've had that like sense of like I've really lost that Latina-ness because you've been, you know, just like erased in that sense of like what being in America should be. I don't know if my mom intended that in the sense of not speaking so much Spanish in the home, and she has certain political views that kind of lean towards like America as opposed to like leaning towards where she's from natively. And so it is interesting that like it's not encouraged in that way, but you lose it and then you become whitewashed whether or not it is intended.
Yeah.
So you also are seeking out your culture, which I think is really, really great. For me, speaking Spanish was more so of a necessity because of my grandparents, and it was more of a sign out of respect. And my mom always told me that you need to speak Spanish. You need to know how to speak Spanish for the sake of other people. It wasn't because it was deeply rooted in my culture. It was just so we included everyone, pretty
Yes,
much.
like to communicate. Like,
Yeah.
you needed to use it to communicate. Yeah.
Exactly. Do you feel that way about Mandarin?
I do, actually. So my dad immigrated here from Hong Kong, but he passed away when I was 4. So after that, like, my mom was like, no, you're going to Chinese preschool. Like, you are going to learn how to be able to communicate with your grandparents and your aunts and your uncles and your cousins. Like, just because your dad isn't here anymore doesn't mean that, like, you're not going to be able to speak or communicate with them. And I would say that, like, my family is very grateful that I speak it and that I can still speak it. The reading and writing has gone away, but I'm trying to get back into that. But the speaking, for sure, I'm actually the only grandchild that my grandma has out of 4
Oh, wow.
that can talk to her.
Wow.
So, yeah. And I don't think my aunt and my uncle really have, like, a kind of bad on them shame, because like both of like my aunt and my uncle on that side, like, they're both Asian, like they're both full Chinese. I'm kind of like, your kids are full. Like, I feel like, especially with like our grandma not speaking a lick of English, like, at all, like, you should teach them like a little bit. It's like, it would be nice for them to grow up bilingual, just so that, I don't know, it opens doors and makes life a little bit easier for them.
Yeah, and that's something that's confused me too, like why people don't teach their kids like their native language, especially like if their grandparents or their aunts or uncles don't speak the native language. Like, my boyfriend was not taught how to speak Spanish, and his grandma only ever spoke Spanish, and his grandpa still only ever speaks Spanish, and he speaks broken English, so all the grandchildren, even the aunts and the uncles, will communicate with him in English. I know he struggles, so when I go and talk to him, I'm like, hey, like, ¿cómo estás? ¿Cómo estado? No te he visto. And he's like, ay, mija, ¿cómo estás? And then he'll talk, like, we'll have a full conversation in Spanish, and I just know he appreciates that.
Yeah, because, like, my cousins, like, they don't understand Mandarin, like, at all. So it's not like you can't talk to them and they, like, understand and they can respond. Like, they can't. Like, they'll just look at you like, what did you just say? I'm like, oh, grandma said this. Like, what do you want to say? And then they'll, like, respond back to English, and then I have to translate again. It's like I'm kind of like that translator for them if their parents aren't there. It kind of makes me sad a little bit that they can't talk to, like, our grandma.
Yeah. I feel bad because I have a grandma that's still alive. The one that I learned to speak Spanish more has recently passed away. When I talk to my grandma from my mom's side, she speaks English, understands English, but it's not super perfect. And she'll speak to me in Spanish, but I'll speak to her in English. So I kind of am not super happy about that. I feel like it's a little disrespectful. She tells me to sometimes, like, learn Spanish. Like, so I definitely.
I also just feel like, especially living in SoCal, it is so useful.
Yeah.
Because, like, maybe in, like, different parts of the U.S., like, probably not, like, it really doesn't, like, affect your day-to-day, but I feel like, especially living in, like, Los Angeles, Long Beach, like, it is used a lot.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you feel about the term no sabo kid being used to refer to people who don't really speak Spanish?
I feel like at least there's an effort. If you're in Osaba, at least there's an effort to communicate, and like if there's an effort to communicate, then so what? Like, okay, you're more proficient than me. Like, aren't we from the same community?
That's true.
Aren't we both
I
Latina?
agree with that.
Like,
Yeah.
you're telling me I'm not Latina enough. Like, stop asking me or stop telling me that I'm not. Just because you do or do not speak Spanish, like, are you an Osabo? Like, from within the community, we're doing it to ourselves. You're made fun of if you don't know how to speak it well. And then it's like, okay, then I won't.
I don't know, I was going to say that even, like, diminishes the, like, want to learn, because, like, you're being shamed for it at the same time.
Yeah, I would agree. I actually didn't know what the no Sawa kid term was before. I had to look it up. My brother knew what it was, but I had no idea what it was. But yeah, no one's ever called me that. If someone would call me that, I wouldn't take it offensively either. But I do agree with you. It's definitely more of like within the same community, it's us versus us. Like, which makes no sense.
And I've never
always
been called
been
that
that
because I feel like I look less Latina, or like people would assume that maybe I look less Latina. So nobody's like really like discriminated me in that time. I've had the privilege to not be discriminated because of the way that I look.
But it's like sometimes I when I think about it with like how my mom grew up, it's just different. Like, she would get made fun of for speaking Spanglish. It was something that was frowned upon.
Yeah.
So I think that's why my mom definitely was like, you're going to learn English. If you're going to learn Spanish, not both, because she would be made fun of. But now it's like, if you don't speak good enough English, they're going to make fun of you. If you don't speak good enough Spanish, they're going to make fun of you. It's like, can't make them happy.
It's a lose-lose situation.
Yeah, it just makes no sense.
Like that difference in expectations with that generational.
Yeah, it's definitely generational, I feel like.
What makes you guys feel connected to your culture?
For me, again, I feel like I just do stuff for my culture every day. Like, my mom usually only cooks Mexican cuisine in the house. I don't really eat anything else unless I'm with like my girlfriend or if I go out. There's certain traditions that I do still hold in myself, like my morals and stuff like that I feel like are more towards from my culture than what I learned from other people growing up. Yeah, that's how I feel. I definitely still feel connected.
I think some of the stuff that connects me back to my culture is like remembering my grandpa. I was never really like taught a lot of different traditions or how to go about things, or sometimes in media, watching movies like Coco is like, I don't know why I feel so connected to that movie right now. Like, that's my only example of culture. I've never been to Mexico. I've never read a lot of like Spanish books. I've been taught a certain amount in school, and even what you're taught in school is a certain perspective and words.
Yeah.
Like in schooling, like the piscina, the alberca thing, like there's a certain textbook term for everything. And so you're learning Spanish from a certain angle, I guess, in that sense.
I think in school it's like Spain Spanish that they're teaching us. Yeah.
100%. I just feel like when it comes to the culture stuff, it's very different too when it's like, at least from my parents, because Mexico's a very big place, but it's like regional. Like, stuff's different in every place you are.
Yeah.
So I just do stuff from wherever my parents are from. Like, I have gone to Mexico a lot of times. My mom's parents are from like TJ. My dad's from Mexico City. So I have like a weird mix of the north and like the capital of Mexico.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh. I was so invested in the conversation. Yeah, I mean, I pretty much grew up with my grandparents, both on my Mexican and my Salvadorian side, and they both definitely showed me what it was like to be Mexican and to be Salvadorian. I really appreciate, like, when I was younger, I had a deeper connection with my Mexican side because that's what I saw the most, like, in my peers. And then as I got older, and after I went to El Salvador 2 years ago, and I just felt amazing going there. It was like my first time back in probably like 17 years. It was so great to be there, and I just felt so connected with my culture. And it just wasn't the fact that I was there, it was the fact that I was enjoying the people, the cuisine, the cuisine especially, my gosh, the music, and just the atmosphere of it, because like El Salvador is known for its volcanoes, and just like waking up and seeing a volcano outside my window, it's like, oh, like, that's really cool. And I don't think that you have to go to your home country or even speak Spanish to feel that connection at all.
Yeah, I find that connection at my boyfriend's aunts and uncles' house a lot of the time, because when I sit there in their backyard and there's different like cliques there. There's the little kids who hang out on their iPads, and there's the little kids who are just old enough to like go play basketball.
Yeah.
The aunts and uncles who only speak Spanish, the ones who kind of mingle with everybody else, kind of speak English, the kids my age, and everybody's hanging out, but there's that environment that you're in, and you just feel so connected in that sense that, like, I'm not there in Mexico, but like I don't know, maybe this is what it's like. Or
It's
like,
just you're surrounded by your people.
yeah, exactly. Mi gente.
Yeah. Mi gente. What about you, Megan?
Honestly, okay, so I've actually never been back to Hong Kong, like where my family is from, mainly because I am not close with that side of my family. Like aside from like my immediate family that are in the United States, like I see them once in a while when they come to visit, but even then, like I don't feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, so I'm gonna book a flight. Like, can I stay with you?
Yeah.
Whenever I have like family gatherings and stuff, it just the family feels like very divided, because there's my aunt and my uncle and my grandma, who are like my dad's family, and like they speak Cantonese. And then we have like my aunt's family, that's my uncle's wife, and her family's from Taiwan, and they only speak Mandarin. And I also only speak Mandarin, so it's like I like talk to them a little bit more, because like I mean like my uncle and my aunt, like my uncle and my grandma, they speak Mandarin too, but when they're around each other, like their default language is Cantonese, and I was never taught that, which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Because that's like, if you go to Hong Kong, that is that is what people speak there, is Cantonese. It's not like Mandarin's like the universal, like everyone speaks it, but then you go to like different parts of China and it like is different. Like, you go to Taiwan, they speak Taiwanese. So I don't know, everything just feels kind of divided. And then you have like my cousins and like my brother that they don't speak like at all, so they're just like kind of like in the corner. So I would say that it actually took me making friends that are like half of one culture, half of another, that I think I felt seen
Yeah.
and accepted. Because like growing up, it was like, oh, I'm too white for the Asian kids. They would call me like half breed, and like
Oh my god.
That's crazy.
and like you don't belong with us because you're not full. And I'm like, I would just look at them and I'm like, okay, and you don't speak or read or write, but here you are.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm like, how does
Facts.
the fact that I'm half like make me less, when like I feel like I know more about that part of the culture than you do.
Yeah.
You know, like why are we doing this right now?
That full verbiage is crazy.
Yes.
Coming
Yeah.
from like within your own community, again, it's like,
Yeah. Yeah, so how do you guys like we just asked that question. How do you embrace your culture?
I mean, like, yeah, but that's like celebrate, like feeling.
That's like a hard question, I feel like, because I feel like for me, I just do it every day and without even knowing, you know.
Because
It's
you're just
you
I'm
live and
just
breathe
there.
it. You
Yeah,
already
yeah.
like you already feel that enough that you don't need to like take that act. I feel like I'm the opposite, where like I don't feel it enough that I would have to step out of that to take that act and then like put on that like.
yeah.
All right, well, I just want to thank our special guest for being on our podcast today. So thank you, Carlo. Thank you, Alexa, for joining us and for sharing your guys' experience. And we will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.